All right, everyone. Welcome to the Angry Asian Uncle podcast. Again, I am your host, Reynold, and my co-host.
Hey, it's Vic, suffering from a little bit of a cold, so I'm a bit hoarse today. Sorry for that.
It's okay. We'll push through. And then
Yes.
today's guest, we have William. William, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm William Brunson, and I'm with Deeper Purpose Coaching, but I'm also the author of a book that will come out in the first quarter of 2026 entitled Faith, Leadership, and Walt, connecting faith, leadership, and the sort of the business practice, vision, and imagination of Walt Disney.
Wow.
Interesting.
We have a lot of unpack. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah. Where do we begin?
Where did the Walt Disney come from? Yeah, I guess.
Well, I've always been really fascinated by Walt Disney. I mean, we always now, of course, the other day was, I think, the 59th anniversary of when he died.
Okay.
And so, I mean, we now look back on what is Disney today. I mean, Disney parks around the world, Disney movies that more than we can name, and a lot of Disney success. But what always been fascinated about Walt was his life was not easy in the early years, and he really had a lot of struggles along the way. His everything from very loving parents, but very hard disciplinarian father, and very strict upbringing that made, well, all the boys in the family leave home before they were 18, most of them running away. Walt left early when he was 16 to join the Red Cross in World War One, and it was a little bit just to get away from his dad and sort of that hard life he was living there. Always loved his parents, but just it was really tough to be under the sort of the scrutiny of Elias. But then when he came back from World War One, his first business was a thing called Laugh-O-Grams because he was always interested in animation, and he was an utter failure. He lost money with he lost money. He failed his investors. At one point, he's sitting in his office. He could because he couldn't afford to live anywhere else, so he was living in his office. He had ran up such a bill with a local diner; they wouldn't feed him anymore. He's eating cold beans out of a can and taking a shower once a week at the local train station in Kansas City. And I mean, it was a bad situation, but Walt was always optimistic. He always was looking for what new thing this was teaching him, what lessons this was teaching him to get him to the next thing that was coming along the way. And I think that's one of the sometimes the thing that we don't remember now is that failure isn't really a failure if it's failing forward, that it's the lesson that moves us to the next is to the next success. And then if there's a struggle there, well, that gets us to the next place. And Walt's life is just one story of that after another.
Oh,
So
interesting.
just
Yeah,
fascinating guy.
yeah.
Well, I
I
didn't
heard
know he
he
had such
like
a rich
went.
history.
Yeah, didn't he go? I heard he went bankrupt summertime. Is that or
He
something?
did. He
I
went bankrupt several times early on, and just it was so hard. And even in Disney World, I mean, well, in the Walt Disney Brothers Studios, and then
mm,
Walt Disney Studios, and then going for Disneyland, all of that was one financial struggle after another. And really, but it just never seemed to slow him down.
right.
And our tendency, I think, in today's culture is whenever there's a roadblock, whenever there's a setback, is to throw our hands up and to simply say, "Oh well," and just walk away.
Oh,
And
William, I'm
that's
curious how long did you do all this research on Walt Disney?
there's some really good books that are available on Walt, of course, but also I've gone through many of the courses in the Disney Institute, where
Oh,
I've gone to Disneyland and been had the privilege of learning sort of their inside language and inside workings
Mm,
from people who are a major part of Disney. And then they tie in the story of Walt because he's still very much a presence in the Disney Corporation.
Uh,
interesting.
I,
Wow.
yeah, I'm interested in the in learning more about this Disney the the training. Is it a or the school? Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. What
Disney Institute. You
institute? Yeah,
can, yeah, they have they have either they'll do a 1 day intensive. You don't really you get sort of the overview of what they're talking about, but you
right.
can go for 3 to 5 days typically to either Disneyland or Disney World,
Oh
and
wow.
you have different courses you can take. There's
Okay.
the course on Disney excellence,
Hmm.
leadership excellence, creativity and innovation. And so there's several courses that they offer that take you into that sort of take you behind the curtain and you see how Disney functions and how they train, how they inspire, what are the keys that they still are sort of the keys to what they do now that were the keys to what Walt did. And safety is always first in everything they do as far as the parks and their resorts go, but family friendly entertainment, because that was Walt's vision was to create family friendly entertainment. And the story for Disneyland, it starts on a park bench. You go out to the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, and out at Griffith Park, there was a carousel at Griffith Park,
Yeah.
and out near the observatory back in the day, and Walt would take his two daughters there on Saturday. Now he already had the
Okay.
studio; things were going great, but he would take his daughters out there every Saturday. It was Daddy Day, and they would go out there and he would sit on the bench and he would watch Diane and Sharon ride the carousel. And when they came around, he'd wave at them. And on another bench, there was other parents waving at their children, and another bench for other parents. And he really realized that for the most part, that's what happened. Parents took their children somewhere and their children had a good time, but the parents really didn't do anything with their kids. They just were there. And he said, I want to create a place where families can enjoy things together and can build core memories that will last a lifetime, that will help them bond together as a family and really strengthen them as a unit. And so that's sort of where the dream of what would become Disneyland, where that came from. And if you go to
Yeah.
Disneyland, when you go in to Disneyland on the right, there's a building there where you have a bench from Griffith Park that is there, and you can go sit on the
Wow.
bench.
Oh wow.
And if you go to Epcot, you go to Epcot now. There is they have just below Spaceship Earth, the giant ball. They put in a statue of Walt sitting on the steps there rather than a bench. He's sitting on the steps, and they call it the Imagination Place. And he's dressed like he would have been on a Saturday taking the girls to the park. He's sitting there looking out over Epcot, which was, of course, his last dream that he was in the process of building, or the he was building Disney World in order to create Epcot. It was his last dream that he had laid out for us before his death.
Oh, so William, sounds like from what you're saying that it's no accident that the Walt Disney Company became what it is today, because it sounds like, first of all, they have a lot of profound insights into what people, kids, families, parents want, what kind of experiences that they're looking for with their children and their families. So, and secondly, just the amount of work that goes into building the brand and also running the physical parks. It's no accident, right, that they got as successful as they did. You mentioned safety. I'm sure there's a lot of standard operating procedures put into place, best
Oh yeah.
practices. I heard from some friends who worked at Disney when they were younger, when they were um, just they just graduated and they needed a job. For my friends who had experience working at Disney, they always spoke very positively about it. They learned a lot about teamwork. They learned how big business can be run efficiently. So they owe a lot of their mindset as they grew older to one of the earlier lessons that they learned by working at Disney. And then fast forward to today, I have some friends who work at corporate at Disney, and they speak very highly of it as well.
Hmm.
First of all, there's tremendous praise for just the just the sheer amount of contentment working at that company. They feel fulfilled. Yes, it's plenty of hard work. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. It can be demanding, but most of them speak positively about how they feel a lot of contentment and how they contribute positively and how they're growing as a person. So I'm not surprised at all when you speak about all these things that you just told us.
Yeah, I mean, Walt always, if he had someone that worked with him and they trained, they learned, and then they left and went to do something else, if they were a success, Walt was extremely thrilled about that because he had done his job. He had taken them from where they were and he helped them to grow into what they could be. And then they went off and did it. And that was a thrill for him. I mean, I know John Maxwell, the leadership expert, talks about that, if you some people have said, what do isn't it bad if you pour a lot of resources and a lot of energy into someone and then they leave you after they grow, they leave you? And Maxwell said, but wouldn't it be a lot worse to not pour any resources into them and not help them grow and they stay? Because
Yeah,
they,
yeah.
yeah, I mean
Good point.
that's worse. And so
Yeah.
Walt embraced that. It was, I mean, when he got to the point that he wanted to create Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it was, of course, the critics referred to it as Disney's folly. There were actually people out there scientists of the day that claimed that if you watched a full length animated movie, you would go insane
Oh,
because no one had ever done it. No one knew what it
no.
would do. And
Yeah.
but he had a problem in that he had all of these tremendous animators because Walt knew his limitations. Walt stopped animating anything probably in the late 20s. He early on he knew that his work as an animator was he was never going to be at the level of other people. And so he didn't do it, but his animators had only drawn, well, animals and things and exaggerated figures on people.
Yeah,
Well, Snow
relatively
White,
simple compared to the stuff that came out in Snow White. I mean, like
right?
Steamboat
Yeah.
Willie was very nice, but it was very simple compared to the technical stuff that came out in Snow White, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and so his animators came to him when he said Snow White has to look like a girl.
Mm.
And everything they have to look like people. The dwarves they will be more characterized, but Snow White has to be a young girl. And he hired an actress to come in, a model to come in to walk and to move so that they could start sketching that. They couldn't do it. And so he, rather than just throw his hands up and say, I'm going to go out and hire all new people, he did what Walt would do. He went and brought in art teachers and people that could train his people how to take the skill they had and adapt it to the skill they needed. And then he just kept pouring into them and training them. And eventually he formed Cal Arts, which would continue to expand and deepen the skills of his crew so that
Yeah,
his
that's
animators could
that's
draw anything.
right. That's so interesting because I read about that as well, about some of the technical difficulties that they came up with when they were in the early days when they were trying to animate a full-length feature film, right? Because even just capturing natural motions from a human being, the way their gait, the way their hands would
Right.
move, or the way maybe even the way their skirts would fall as they turn, all
Yeah.
these things had to look natural. And I'm really glad I learned how he did it, which is what you said, which is he brought in models to walk and actually do the motion. It's almost like an early days mocap, right? Except everything was hand drawn, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And
And
even
even
animators from Japan like Miyazaki, who's very adamant about using as less possible CGI as possible and just doing everything by
mhm.
hand. Reminds me of the spirit of the early Disney movies, right? Where everything was a work of art. Every cell, every frame was like pure
Yeah.
art. It's a lot of work because imagine animating all of that and it had to look smooth and it had to look seamless. The transitions had to be good. And just the amount of work that had, and the budget probably, I would imagine it
Oh yeah.
probably cost some money
It
back in the day to
it
do that,
started
right?
off being a $500,000 budget for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was a
Yeah.
$1.5 million budget by
By
the
the
time he
time he
finished.
finished, right?
Because I
Right.
mean, when he realized that in his one of the first viewings when they went into the closet, which was a very small screening room, and he saw some of the initial footage, and he realized how flat it still was. Which
Hmm.
Steamboat Willie was flat. All of these were flat. He had to figure out, how do I get depth into this, and so the Disney Walt and his team invent the multi-plane camera.
Hmm.
And so they started having to animate the backgrounds on glass rather
Wow.
than doing it just on cells. They were drawing it now on glass, and you would shoot with a camera shooting through two or three panes of glass, and they would move the panes back and forth so that it would look like the reeds were rustling in the by the creek, or that
Wow.
the sun,
All that
all of
innovation,
that to get
right?
that depth
Yeah.
in there, that then what they were animators were drawing would have to go on top of that. And it was really, it was
Yeah.
so
So ahead of
fascinating
its
how he did
time.
it, so ahead of his time. And but he
Yeah.
also was such a passionate visionary that in when it came time in 1934, when he knew he wanted to draw, he wanted to do a full length animated movie. He knew he had to have everybody on board. He had to have these people who didn't know how to do what he was asking them to do, and he had to have them say yes. And
Hmm.
so there was a night in October in 1934 that Walt gave all of his animators 50 cents each and sent them out to have a steak dinner. Now, let's just pause there and think that you could go have a good steak dinner for 50 cents.
Yeah,
That
I
is
know,
just
right?
amazing.
That sounds great.
I really would. I want that back. I want that back.
Yeah.
But
Those
he
were
gave them
good
all.
days. Good old
They
days.
they all went out. They had their steak dinner, and they come back. He said, "Come back to the sound stage," and they came back to the sound stage, and they all sat down. And on the sound stage was a lone light that was sitting on the edge of the stage, and Walt. And Walt stood there, and across the next 3 or 4 hours, Walt told them the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from the very beginning of the story to the very end of the story. And I mean, he got into every character. When it
Mm.
came time for the Wicked Witch to bring the apple to Snow White, he throws his coat up over his head and he crouches down. He is animated as every one of the dwarfs. He is living it out.
Wow.
And one of the people sitting there that night said that he said we all walked out of that room knowing that we would do anything. We would work without pay in order to make that movie
Wow.
because we were on board. And
Well,
so
he's
he
good at
gets
inspiring people.
absolutely, he gets them all on
Yeah.
board. He gets them all excited. And then of course, okay, we've got to figure out how to make this work. And if you remember, Disney in that same period of time did a thing called Silly Symphonies. And Silly Symphonies was how Walt was encouraging his animators to learn and to grow. And so they're drawing Silly Symphonies and they're getting ready for Snow White. And he was always that's also what I love about him is not only does he not give up, he's he's always investing in his people so that they're always growing. I love that. But I also love that he's always forward thinking. Again, another John Maxwell quote that I love is John Maxwell says, leaders are the ones who see more and they see before. So they see more than the other people are seeing, and they see it before the other people see it.
And
And
Reynold, I could
Walt,
just, sorry, so cut you
no,
off. I
no,
was just gonna say, Reynold, I could just imagine though the conversation he had with his CFO, when they were running way out of, way above budget, like, oh, the movie's how much now? 1.5 million? I could just imagine that conversation that they had. Like, oh, dude, you gotta find some way to, spend less money. Like we're really running on the red here.
that basically was their discussion from day one of the Disney Brothers studio until Walt's death in '66.
My
That was
gosh,
their
yeah.
discussion. Because remember, his CFO was his brother Roy, who was 8 years older
I
than him.
remember.
I can just imagine it's like, hey, bro, you really gotta, go easy on the budget
Yeah.
here.
His big brother was the CFO of the company and did not have the visionary skills or insight
He's a
that Walt
businessman.
did
He's a
at all.
CFO.
He
Yeah,
was
yeah,
total businessman.
yeah,
And
By the numbers.
yeah, and so yeah, I mean, you get to 1.5 million on a $500,000 budget,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely crazy. And
Because
um,
Reynold and I, being Asian uncles, we're keenly aware of that. Like, oh, what budget? Oh, yeah, you gotta like control that budget.
yeah,
Oh man,
yeah,
Use
but
less. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
they figured out they had their each of them had a skill, and they appreciated that. I mean, early on, back in 1928, Walt realized that he really never needed to negotiate a contract again because it really wasn't what he was good at. Roy, his brother, was good at that. He was a details guy. And
Mm.
so he turned those kind of things over to Roy after 1928, but he learned it the hard way because in 1928 he went to New York. He and his wife Lillian took a train, went to New York. They were going to negotiate. He thought he was just going to negotiate some more money out of Universal and Charles Mintz, who was the distributor, and he was going to get more money out of Mintz for the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons that he was drawing. Oswald was his first hit. I mean, Oswald was big. Everybody loved Oswald. And he gets there, and Mintz tells him, no, I'm not giving you
No,
any more money.
just saying a flat out no.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Matter of fact, I'm going to give you less money, and I need you to produce more. And when Walt said, I can't do that, I mean, that's just not feasible. Mintz looked at him and said, well, you probably should have read the contract you signed a while back
Oh,
because Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, the only character that you have, yeah, I own him.
oh wow.
And Universal owns him. I own him. It's just you don't have him anymore.
So
And
Reynold basically a reality check, got slapped with hard cold reality, right?
hard. I mean,
Yeah.
and then he added insult to
Yeah.
injury. He said, and because Walt said, well, but you can't do anything with Oswald. I mean, I'm the visionary behind Oswald and the storylines. I know I do all that, and my animators do the rest. He said, I can come up with people that can do storylines. And he said,
Mm.
those 20 animators you have back in California? Yeah, my brother-in-law's been out there while you've been on the train coming across. My brother-in-law's been in at your studio, and he's hired 17 of your animators away from your studio. You got three
Whoa.
people left.
Wow.
And Walt,
That's so cutthroat.
Oh
yeah,
man.
basically, he wanted Walt to go to work for him.
Yeah.
He
Be a
was he was
slave.
he said,
Yeah.
"Oh, we'll keep it named the Disney Brothers Studio. We don't care."
It
But
reminds me of
you're
the
you're just
Beatles too, William. Like,
oh
like
yeah,
so
yeah.
people are saying that it's precisely because the group dynamics, like they would fight. Like this is what a lot of people don't understand about the Beatles. Like, they're all very talented and they all have their vision and how a song is supposed to go. So they would fight constantly as band members. But it's precisely because of that push and pull that they came out
Hmm.
with hit after hit, right? So it's like
Yeah.
his collaboration with his brother Roy because being a creative, he knows that he needs to reserve his energy for the creative stuff. He needed
Right.
to hand over the business side of things to somebody who's good at that so he can free
Yeah.
up his time to do what he's good at, right? Kind of
Yeah.
reminds me of the best bands out there doing the same thing. But I think
Hmm.
it's funny also how history kind of is repeating itself that, a lot of other companies now and creatives would accuse Disney of doing exactly the same thing that Disney himself faced back in the day. There's,
Yeah.
accusing Disney of like, oh, you're working us to death. You're trying to own every IP. Like there's nothing out of the Disney Corporation now. Everything's owned by Disney. Marvel. Whatnot. Everything, right?
Right.
It's like name
Right.
something
Yeah.
that's not owned by Disney.
I know.
So I just think it's so
I know.
funny how how the more things change, the more things stay the same.
Yep. Yep.
What do you say about that, though, Will? Like about people who
Yeah.
accuse Disney of doing that?
It's tough. I mean, they're what I see them doing is they seem to want everything to rise to their level, and they want to preserve things that some people have said that why they purchase the IP of different characters, different genre, is because they see it drifting. They see it as financially feasible, a good financial investment. Of course, they're not a humanitarian group, so they're
Right,
not a
right.
nonprofit group, so they see the value in it, but they also keep true to the storylines, and that's what I know they've done with has been really an obsession of theirs with Lucasfilms and Star Wars and making sure that they try to stay true to where the storylines could go, should go, and what the fans would embrace with the storylines.
Yeah.
And trying to hold the nostalgia for those of us that, I mean, I grew up, I saw Star Wars in theater 9 times. And so, and this time of year, the only thing only thing my parents would be getting in to wrap and put under the tree would have been Star Wars characters of some sort.
Right, right.
I mean, that was once they came out, my parents had it easy. You just get him more Star Wars and he's happy.
Yes.
And so they really try to hold true to what the those of us that grew up with it would embrace, but also how to keep the storyline going so that the next generation will understand and will embrace. And that's been that was the struggle of the Disney organization after Walt's death is
Mhm.
they kept wanting to do it the way Walt would do it, would have done it, would do it the way Walt would have done it. But what they didn't understand was, and it wasn't until many years later that they finally caught on to the fact that if Walt were still alive, he would no longer be doing it the way he had done it. He
Mm.
would be
Yeah, that's a
doing it
good point.
differently.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He would
Yeah.
be moving
Be
forward with it.
adapting.
He
You
would
would
be
be evolving
progressing
as
and
well as a
adapting.
creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Adapting.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, this is the man who created audio animatronics
Mm.
so that you could because you couldn't put live animals in the jungle cruise because let's just put it like this: nobody wants to ride in a boat when you have a herd of hippos that could potentially eat
Yeah,
you.
sure.
And
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
you
Yes.
create audio animatronics for that, and I mean the things he did to progress things, even down to when they opened Disneyland, he wanted the haunted mansion. He
Mm.
wanted the haunted mansion there because it was going to be this great story, but he couldn't make it work.
Mm.
And so the haunted mansion sat there for a year after Disneyland opened until the
Mm.
technology caught up
Caught up. Yeah.
where
Okay.
they could actually
Interesting.
do it. And that, he just, so what Disney does now, I think, whenever they acquire something, I think the question is, okay, what are they going to do with it? How are they going to
Yeah.
advance it? Where are
Reminds me
they
of
going to
something
take
that I
it?
saw online about they were asking George Lucas why he decided to sell Lucasfilm to Disney.
Hmm.
And I think he basically came up with the same reply that you said. He was concerned about the legacy of Star Wars and he wanted a company that was up to his standards.
Hmm.
to keep the franchise going. But of course, like, in between all of that, there's been a lot of controversy because, some hits and misses right along the way. Some of
Right.
the films were not that well received by some of the fans. Although recently, with shows like The Mandalorian, it's coming back to form and people are
Yeah.
happy about that again. So
Yeah.
there is struggle there in that just because you're proficient in the creative field and you have a high standard doesn't mean you automatically just nail it every time, right?
You're right.
Yeah, so I
Right.
think
Yeah.
people should cut Disney some slack. It's not easy to just because when you acquire all these IP, right, they're all its own universe,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's got its own lore, it's got its own fan base, it's got its own history. So to nail each one precisely, I think is a lot of work. And so I think people should definitely keep that in mind and cut Disney some slack, right? But
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
been, coming out with hits now recently, with regards to Star Wars, right? So it's coming
Hmm.
back to form, I think, yeah. And also
Yeah.
Well,
to your point about, I think it's such a fine, delicate balance, isn't it, William, to, pay homage to the past, but at the same time not get stuck there, right? Like you
yeah.
said, it's such a good insight that, well, Walt wouldn't have done it this way anymore, right? It's
Hmm.
like he himself would have evolved. So it's like, how do you pay honor to your legacy, but at the same time, you're always looking towards the future, right? Always looking ahead and see what else can we do to wow people? Like, what can we bring? What kind of value added can we add to the world, right? As a company,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
back in the early 60s, the movie Splendor in the Grass came out, which was in its day a little controversial movie, a little risque. And
Hmm.
um, and Walt took a lot of his core team and they went and saw the movie together. And he came out and he said, "So tell me how we could have made that movie better." And they were doing live action. They've been doing live action for quite a while. And so they started naming we would have shot this differently, or we would have used this, or we would have set it up and built the storyline this way. And he said, absolutely. All of those are
Yeah.
great ideas, and you're right. All of those would have helped make this movie. We could have made this movie better. But here's the thing: we can never make that movie because
Mm.
he knew that Walt Disney, he knew his name had become his brand, and his
Hmm.
brand was family friendly
Yeah, wouldn't
entertainment
allow for that kind of movie,
and
right?
wouldn't
Yeah.
allow for that. And so think about, he dies in 66, and it is not until the 80s when Disney creates Touchstone Pictures and creates their first PG movie,
Mm.
Splash.
Oh, wow, I love
Wow.
that movie.
I love it. I
Nice.
mean, it's a great
I love
movie,
it.
but
Yeah.
they create Splash, and it's their first venture, but it's not a Walt Disney production. It's Touchstone,
Right. Well,
and
that's
but they
smart though,
figured out
right?
a way
Yeah.
to
Right.
do
Yeah.
it. They
Yeah,
they
yeah.
figured out a way. That was when they started asking, what would Walt do, not
Hmm.
what would Walt have done. And so they create another entity that can take them into a new genre and a new world of
Yeah.
movies that aren't animated or aren't G.
That's so smart. Yeah, I have a friend who works for Marvel, and then he was saying even back when all the Marvel characters were at their peak in cinemas, that they could already foresee spandex fatigue coming along.
Mm,
Even back then, they could already see it coming. So, like, I think within the office, the discussion was how do we how do we keep this enthusiasm for all these superheroes going on the big screen without people getting sick and tired of seeing another superhero, right? So like the momentum's there, but they know that the wave would eventually come down, and then, how do you keep it going? So as expected, after the climax, which is I think what was the last was it Avengers, what was that movie? The last
The
one
last
that they did?
Avenger was the Endgame.
Endgame, right.
in
So
game,
like
yeah.
that was the climax, right? So they knew that they had this monumental challenge ahead of them after that movie. Like how
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
they tried different ideas, right, William? Remember they came out with the Eternals, they came out with
Right.
Yeah.
some TV shows as well, not necessarily just movies. They also
Yeah.
tapped
Disney Plus.
into
Yeah.
Right. And Reynolds, remember some of the B superheroes like Daredevil and like all the
Right.
other they
Oh,
tried
they're
everything
yeah,
basically.
they're
Yeah.
going down to the C and D superheroes.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
was
because
yeah,
yeah.
but I was gonna comment even though there's some fatigue or regarding the Marvel superhero, I feel Disney still did a way much better than Warner Brothers with
Yeah,
their
with
DC line of
regards to
superheroes.
DC, yeah,
Yeah,
with the
Yeah.
Justice
I
League,
just
right.
feel I don't know. It's like what would be the fate of DC if it was Disney? I feel it
Hmm.
would be
Well,
a
no,
whole new.
apparently Warner Brothers is up for sale, right? And Netflix is trying
That's
to
Yeah,
buy
right.
them,
but
right?
Netflix is
That's
true. So
true.
maybe
That answers
Netflix is
your
gonna do
question.
something. So Netflix has been doing pretty good. They did give us a K-pop demon hunter. So
There you go.
so so I don't know. They're gonna turn that DC world around. So Disney
Yeah.
got to watch out.
I think we have to be grateful that movies are at this caliber these days, right? Because like we're getting so spoiled as audiences. Like back in the day, if we see a little bit of special effects, we're so blown away. Right? I remember like the first trilogy in Star Wars, just the lightsaber alone, like oh my
Oh
God, it's
yeah.
a
Yeah.
Oh
lightsaber!
my
My
God!
brain
Yeah.
is blown.
Exactly.
But I remember the
Uh,
fight scenes between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. Oh, I mean,
Hmm.
looking back now as an adult, it's like, that wasn't a great choreography. It was just like, a couple of swings with a lightsaber and
Right.
that's it.
Right.
And then, but back then we were so impressed, right? And so we've gotten so spoiled as an audience that we expect special effect after special effects, and to the point where we're so it won't feel anything anymore, right? So when we do like something, that tells you that it must be really special, right? Nowadays,
Hmm.
if we like something, that means it's not just special effects, it's the writing, it's the character development. And I think Disney still kind of, comes out with bangers every once in a while. It's like not all of them, but they're trying, right? And that's more than I can say for a lot of other studios, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And anytime the interesting thing is sort of their growth process. Anytime you see something that's not good, that sort of or is mediocre at best, you probably will pick up on something in the next movie that's really good. That okay, they learned.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't do that again.
Mm,
And so they've always been willing to do that. They've always been willing to
yeah.
learn from their mistakes. And I mean, you go back right after Snow White, you get Pinocchio, and then you get
Wow, that's a good
Fantasia.
one too. Yeah.
But Pinocchio and Fantasia were financial flops for two different reasons. One,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Pinocchio was initially a financial flop because, well, Hitler. Um,
Uh,
the World War II had started, and Hitler had already begun his work through Germany and through Europe, and he had shut down the markets. And Italy shut down the market as well, even though Pinocchio is an
mm,
Italian story. Italy wouldn't allow it to be shown because it was Disney based, and so they didn't have the European market. So financially, it became a struggle. Even though it is animation, the animation is much better than what was even in Snow White. Well, then Fantasia came next, and that's where he takes the really some of the best work and with animation and Mickey as the sorcerer's apprentice and he marries it with all of this classical music and that's one of those where he admitted at the I think it was at the Academy Awards he admitted that Fantasia was a failure as far
wow.
as
That's hard to believe now. I mean, because it's such
I
a
know.
classic now.
yeah.
Yeah.
But in that period of time in the 40s, it was like, okay, how many people really do listen and appreciate classical music?
Mm,
And so it became that struggle of
yeah.
culture. But it was helping him advance what he was doing. And so then you get much better drawing and you get much better story development and suddenly you get Bambi and the line keeps going. You get Dumbo and they keep, the stories keep growing and you get Cinderella and I mean it's just everything that was sort of bad was teaching him the next thing.
William, is
And
it true that Hitler's chief of what do you call it, propaganda was an admirer of Disney's? Is that true, or is it just
yeah,
a weird
he did.
anecdote I heard from somewhere?
No, he admired the Disney movies. I mean, everyone. I mean, Mickey Mouse. We don't really in today's world. There's so many celebrities out there, and that the world doesn't really catch on to one in and just as in mass any longer. But Mickey Mouse really was one of those people characters, animated even an animated character that the whole world loved.
Mm.
His personality, his um, sort of
Had a
that.
global reach even back in the 40s.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, from when he appeared as Steamboat Willie, and for the first time ever, there was an animated cartoon with sound. From that day, Mickey Mouse clubs began not long after that, and you had kids going to watch movies. You had people that would not go see a movie in Europe and in America if there wasn't a Mickey Mouse cartoon ahead of it.
Mm, wow.
The royal family in England had a series of Mickey Mouse cartoons shown at Buckingham Palace for the family. I mean, this he was that popular. So yeah, I mean, even Hitler's
Wow.
people appreciated Mickey,
So it's not just
but
some misinformation that I heard. This is
no,
true.
no, and
Okay.
but Hitler ruled Mickey out along with all the rest, and of course, during World War II. Walt Disney was so amazingly patriotic that he nearly bankrupted his company because of it.
Mm,
Because he stopped pretty much making animated movies for the most part. He really cut everything back,
hmm.
and he created war films. He created training films
Right.
for the
For the
military
war
in
effort.
their
Yeah.
studios. Yeah, he used his characters, and they drew Donald Duck selling you war bonds
Mm, right. Right.
and all
Yeah.
those kind of things.
Right.
And Roy the whole time, his brother is saying, we probably need something that'll bring money in, and that'd probably be
You sure
good.
he's not Asian?
We need some income, not just
That's
I mean,
right.
Reynold,
We
even
got
not just
going back to
spending.
something that's a little bit closer to our time. I mean, it just can you imagine growing up without The Little Mermaid, Aladdin,
it.
Beauty and the Beast? I mean, these
Wow.
were part of our
Lion
childhood, It's
King.
like
Yeah.
I think if you really pause for a moment and think, you realize that how much of our lives were part of it, Disney was such a part of our, years growing up, our formative years as children, right? I can't imagine growing up without those movies anymore.
Mhm.
And they brought a lot of joy, to be honest.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think
I
a lot
look
of
back to
teaching
those
too.
things exactly,
Yeah.
very fondly. And even now, when we revisit them as adults, they're great films. I still
Oh,
Hmm.
enjoy
yes.
watching them. They really
Yeah.
stood the test of time. In fact,
Yes.
even the earlier stuff, like William said, if you're sharp enough, you realize that some of this earlier stuff, you would catch some risque stuff in there or some psychedelic stuff in there. Like I remember watching Dumbo as an adult, and I'm like, wow, there's that sequence where he goes into a trip, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that was quite psychedelic. I was like, well, if you know what's going on there, it's almost like he's on a drug trip. It was animated so well too. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
some of the stuff you
Yeah.
catch when you're a little bit older, right?
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
true.
So there's
Yeah. When
something
you
for
look back,
everyone.
you gotta read in between the lines sometimes.
Yeah, you
Exactly.
do.
Yeah. My
Uh,
gosh. Oh man.
but but how did so William, how does this all tie into your book, I guess? So it's all fun facts or educational,
Mhm.
inspirational, but how does it tie into your book, I guess?
Well, from the in the book, I talk about the fact that is leaders who are people of faith, that the story of Scripture is always filled with these stories of people who don't give up. They keep going. They're told that they can't, but that doesn't stop them. I mean, I think about David, who was he's the youngest of Jesse's sons. He is a shepherd. When Samuel goes to select the new king for Israel, and he looks at all the other brothers and goes, "Man, none of y'all are going to be the king." They finally bring David up, and he says, "Oh, this is the one." I mean, so this kid is the one that will one day be king. But one day when the Israelite people are battling the Philistines, and Goliath, this giant, is arguing and mocking them because no one will come out and fight him, David is sent by their dad to take lunch to his brothers. So he's not even there for a valid reason, like military. He's just there to bring lunch. And he hears Goliath and he says, "So who's going to go fight him?" Well, the Israelite army said, "Well, none of us." And so David said, "I'll do it." So, here he is. He shouldn't be there. He's the smallest. The odds are against him. Everything is sort of, everything says defeat will happen. But he heads out there. Saul, the existing king, tries to put his armor on David, which is massively too big. And David's like, "I can't wear your armor. I got to be the person I'm supposed to be and go out and do this." And so he goes out. He takes 5 stones and a slingshot, and first stone takes Goliath down. And people over the years have asked, why has David got 5 stones with him? Did that show that David had maybe some faith issues where he was questioning God, or thinking that the first stone was not going to work? The reality is, Scripture later tells us that Goliath had 4 brothers, and David was going out prepared that if he took down Goliath, and Goliath's 4 brothers came to also get revenge for their fallen brother, he'd be ready, and he would just go ahead and take them out too. And so it's that story of, yeah, we don't always seem like we're the person for the job, but God doesn't call the equipped; He equips the called. And so once we say yes, then God's with us in the process, and we just have to keep moving forward. And David, he had ups and downs. He had very bad moments, but he's always, Scripture records, he was considered a man after God's own heart. That God truly did love David and never stopped loving David. And I think for us, we have to keep going and keep trying, and knowing that what we're doing is trying to fulfill our purpose in life. And when I look at Walt Disney, Walt never stopped. He was always trying to fulfill his purpose in life.
Right, right, yeah.
And it was all about, and it grew over the years. It started out being family entertainment, but then he wanted to create a world where families got along, and where there was greater sense of peace, so that families could thrive. And so he was always staying true to his call and his purpose. And he was Walt never put on anyone else's armor. He was always who he was. And there were so many great stories of folks coming in and seeing him when Disneyland was being built. They would go to find Walt because they were bankers, and they were going to talk to Walt about funding issues or whatever. And they would find a group of men working on something, all wearing really just sort of worn out work clothes, dirty as they could be. And the guy in the middle doing work, that was Walt. Because
Wow.
he never was trying to be who he wasn't. He always was comfortable in his own skin, trying to fulfill his purpose. And like I
Yeah,
say, his
wow.
purpose did evolve. He grew to that point of wanting to see families around the world connected. And that's why I said earlier that EPCOT was his last dream, that he was trying to bring to fruition, because he saw it literally as the experimental prototype community of tomorrow.
Mm,
And he wanted to see EPCOT not necessarily exactly what we have. He wanted people from all the different countries that are represented there, and even more, to come and live in that space together.
wow, yeah. Yeah.
When he was when they were building Disneyland and he wanted the Jungle Cruise, one of the reasons he created the audio animatronics, as I said, was you don't really want a boatload of people with a herd of hippos. But his technicians told him there's you have challenges with this. If you do this with the live animals, we're going to hire a lot of veterinarians that understand how to treat these animals. We're going to have to keep them fed. Many of them we're going to have to keep awake because they're nocturnal. So we got to keep them awake while the people are here, or it gets really boring really fast.
Hmm.
And we got to keep them from killing each other because they're
Yeah.
they're natural predators to each other. They don't get along in the wild. They're not going to get along in Disneyland. And so we got issues. And so he creates audio animatronics.
It's
In
like one
Epcot,
issue after another, right? He's just solving
yeah.
all those issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in Epcot, what he wanted was he wanted people from, well, then it would have been the USSR. He wanted people from the USSR and people from America and people from England, and he wanted them living next to each other in apartments or housing. He wanted people that were they just don't get along for whatever reason. And some of it is historic, some of it is religious, some of it is by a lot of other reasons. He wanted them to come and live next to each other so they got to know each other. And because he always felt that if people could get to know each other, they'd realize that a family is a family is a family. And if they could live next to each other and they could find peace together and they could find common ground, it might could change the world. And in
Wow.
one of his helicopter trips over the land that currently is Epcot, he was telling someone because, like I say, leaders see more than before, and he could see it. And as they flew over in the helicopter, he was explaining to Bob Gurr. He was explaining to him that he said, "You see, right there in the middle is going to be a lagoon, sort of a large lake." And he said, over there, right there on the northern side of it, that's where there's going to be a bench, and that's where Lillian and I are going to sit, and we're going to watch the people of the world getting to know each other and
Wow.
spending time together. And because envisioned himself living in or spending time in Epcot.
I didn't
Um,
know there were so many layers to Epcot. I mean,
Yeah.
I just remember going to Epcot all those years ago, and I did catch a whiff of that spirit, and I thought that was so different from the rest of Disney. Because I even went to Disneyland in Japan.
hmm,
So like I got to visit a couple of the parks, and then but Epcot was kind of special. It felt different, and I didn't know. Oh wow, I'm learning so much today. Like after you explained, I didn't realize that that was his original vision for Epcot, and there's so many layers to it. But even with its current form, you still catch a little bit of that.
you
Even
do,
just
because
the
you're,
international cuisine, right?
yeah,
Us being Asian, and Reynolds can appreciate this, because I was on my honeymoon with my wife, and then we've been traveling through the States for a couple of weeks at that point, and we were just like hankering for Asian food at that point. Like we were just like looking for plain white rice,
yeah.
with some Asian food to go with it at that point. And then I had my first taste of Asian food after all those weeks when I was at Epcot. I was like, oh, thank God, like finally. I remember eating, I think it was white rice with sukiyaki, in the Japanese pavilion or
hmm
something. And then, even just eating the food, the cuisine from different places, but it's all within Epcot. You're in the Disney theme park. And it felt kind of surreal. It's like,
Yeah.
this is so different from the rest of the other attractions that they have. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
quite interesting. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
And
I
imagine if
love
if it had gone through, Reynold, if Walt Disney original vision had gone through,
Yeah.
wow, right?
It would have been
yeah.
amazing. I mean, and really the only reason that Walt Disney World exists, the Magic Kingdom in Florida, the only reason that exists is to build Epcot. That,
Wow.
it was you always looking ahead. And Roy, his brother, when he wanted to build Epcot, Roy looked at him and said, "We can't afford that." But we have a tried and true model that makes
Mm,
money.
right.
Disneyland makes a lot of money
Oh
out
yeah.
down there,
Right.
and then we will. we can, if it makes money, we'll build Epcot next.
Do you,
And Walt agreed and allowed Disney World to be built. And the reason Disney World, you probably have all heard about that it sits on top of the underground city. It's called the Utilidor,
hmm.
but it sits on top of that. The reason the Utilidor is there is it is convenient because they can move from part of the
Yeah,
park to
this
the
just
other
makes
part of the park
sense.
and
Yeah.
nobody sees them.
Right.
But the reason it's there is because they didn't know if it would sink
Ah.
Oh.
because it's built on a
Oh,
swamp.
okay.
And so they didn't know how deep the swamp water went. And so they had to get something built on bedrock. And so they
Right.
went down deep and they built the Utilidor on bedrock. And then they built Disney
Wow,
World on
all this
top of it
information about
to
Disney, right?
to create this income stream that would allow him then to build Epcot. I mean, he had already introduced Epcot on the Wonderful World of Disney,
Right.
but it's so telling that in early December of 66, when he goes back in the hospital, he's last in the park in around December 5th, around his birthday. And he goes out and he does. They were supposed to build another well, sort of a resort community in the Sierra Nevada mountains called Mineral King. And so some of the attractions that are in Disney World were actually for Mineral King, Country Bear Jamboree, things like that. But he'd gone out and he did a press conference related to that, and he went back in and spent a few last days in the office, and then he checked himself back into the hospital because the lung cancer surgery he had had, he knew he was having complications, and well, his brother Roy is in a bit of a panic because Roy is not an imaginator, is not, he doesn't have the vision. He's not the visionary.
Mm-hmm.
And the visionary is laying in a hospital bed almost across the street from the studios and is dying. And so Roy spends as much time as he can with Walt. When Walt would be awake, he would spend as much time as he could. And there's a story of Roy and Walt in the room. Roy sitting there with his legal pad, writing as
Taking
fast as he
notes,
could.
getting all
Walt is
the
How
ideas
to
as much
be
as he can
happy,
before he
right?
passes on, right?
This vision.
Walt was laying in his bed, laid back in his bed, using the 2x2 grid system of the ceiling to lay out for Roy how Epcot was supposed to be designed.
Oh,
And that
wow.
Epcot, you've got to make sure that over here you put this, and you've got to put this over here, and going over those kind of details with him as much as he could, so that he could get as much information about Epcot offloaded before the
He
time
passes
came that he
on,
would
yeah.
pass away. And
Wow, such interesting stories. Also, William, I heard about there was actually Disney offered homes, right? Is this something you know anything about? Like I saw this in the documentary somewhere. I remember that Disney at one point actually offered almost like a prefab home. It was built, right?
mhm,
And then this would be like a model home for people who wanted to live in that kind of a community.
right.
It had everything you wanted. It was built according to, um, maybe the taste and the style of Disney. If you like the theme parks, you probably love this kind of home. Very American, very Americana. So
hmm
what can you tell us about that? I just find it fascinating that he even went as far as doing that.
Yeah, it was his idea was to try to create community. And so, I mean, even if you go to a Disney park now or a Disney resort now, when you check in, oftentimes when you check in, they greet you when you walk up and they'll say, "Welcome home."
Um,
And they are always, he was always trying to create this sense of community because he always knew that in that through community, peace could be found. Through community, progress could be made, and he just believed that. And so, yeah, if we could provide homes and we could provide people the opportunity to come and live in an idyllic kind of setting where they would have, they wouldn't really have to go anywhere and do anything. They would be able to come and live there. He could provide an opportunity for them to really connect with each other.
uh,
And
right.
he was just a fascinating individual.
Randall, can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Like nowadays, how great that would be. Let's say, for example, Tesla offered you a home that had everything you need in the modern age, and then selling it to you at a very very beautiful price, and then top-notch quality. Wouldn't you take it? I would. I'm
Yeah,
thinking like, yeah, it's
yeah, I would
yeah,
take it.
right. It's such a great
Yeah,
product, and
but
Disney
like,
actually came up with that idea years ago.
Hmm.
yeah, I think yeah, I mean, I live like 20 minutes from Disneyland. So, but the issue right now is because Disneyland's so expensive to go to.
Hmm.
But I love going to Disneyland. The times I go, whatever. I mean, I feel Disney. Walt, he did a very good job in creating these parks because when you go in, even though you're like complaining about the price or if you have some sort of issues or whatever, you enter through those gates and you're just like, oh, this is the happiest place on earth. You're just like,
Right.
okay, let's yeah,
Yeah.
everything just melts away and you're like, yeah, there's Mickey, there's Goofy. Let's go on Magic Mountain or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
not Magic Mountain. And, let's go to whatever whatever rides. Like you're like a kid again.
Hmm.
Of course, when you exit those gates again, like, oh, reality starts again. Like, how much was my bill? I remember
Right.
someone like posted on their bill. They went to Disneyland for like I think there's four people. There, it was one of those lunch like no the buff no, like one of those buffet. It's for their kids' birthday because and then their bill was like 1,000 something, but it was just like a
Wow.
regular American pancake breakfast
Mm.
thing.
Mm.
And of course, Mickey Mouse and them came out, but it was like $1,000 or something for like four people, and everyone's like,
One word, man. Inflation. Inflation.
right? But it's like it's. I mean, the dad posted it up. It's not half was saying, "Man, look at this price," but then it's also merry. I mean, you got two sides of it. Half of the people are saying, "Oh, look at this, so expensive. Going to Disneyland, it's supposed to be happy. It's not for everyone." Like maybe in the past, maybe when Walt Disney was alive, yeah, he tried to make it so everyone can enjoy it. But now that he's not around, so Disney is just out for money, and things are so high priced that it's so hard for everyone to go enjoy Disneyland or even Disney World. I mean, Disney World can be even because Disney World is like a multi-day thing. Like Disneyland, you could probably get
Right.
by like a 1 day thing, but like everyone says, you go to Disney World, you can't just go 1 day. It's almost like almost a whole week. Like you got to go a few days. You
Yeah,
can't. Yeah,
you're gonna
possibly.
you're gonna need multiple days in
Yeah,
Disney World because you want to go to all four parks and you want to go to Disney Springs, which is unlike Disneyland, where you have downtown Disney running between Disneyland California Adventure.
right.
You have to go to a whole other area to go to Disney Springs in Florida. So you want your time there. You know. Then there's the water parks, and then there's the golf courses, and then,
Right.
I mean, in
Uh,
Japan, for example, there's the Tokyo Disneyland and the Disney Sea, right? So a
Mhm.
lot of the adults would actually go on dates at Disney Sea because it's more, adult or oriented versus
Okay.
Disneyland, where it's for kids. But I think it just speaks to how they cater to everybody, right? There's even the Disney cruise, right? You can go
Oh
on
yeah,
oh
yeah,
cruises
yeah,
that
yeah,
are
there's
Disney
Disney
yeah.
themed,
cruises.
right?
Yeah,
Disney
Yeah.
cruise,
that's
the
popular
Disney
with
Cruise
kids. I
Line
mean,
is massive.
family.
There
Yes.
you go. And there's that, right? It's such an
Yeah.
empire. But when I hear William's stories, I'm a little bit jealous of people from that time in history. I mean, it reminds me of some great architects from those days, like Frank Lloyd Wright, and other architects where they try to build all these in their vision, these model villages or model communities.
Hmm.
And then they would incorporate their talent as designers or architects into it, and then trying to see their vision come to life, right? Whatever you are, Walt Disney was a dreamer, a planner. All these architects are great at design, but all of them have the same goal, which is like they wanted to see this experiment come to fruition, right? They want to see, like, if we put people together, how would that work out? Especially people who
Right,
disagree with each other, right? People from
right.
all different backgrounds. So you have all these great thinkers and dreamers from the 50s and 60s trying to do those things, and where are these people now? It's like I'm a little jealous,
Me too.
Right.
Me
Right.
too.
right, where are these
Yes.
people now?
Yeah, we need those people, and we need the 50-cent steak dinners too.
There we
Oh
Yeah,
my
go.
we could
gosh.
we could get those things back. We're good.
Yeah. Yes. That should be a permanent. They should offer those 50-cent steak dinners
Oh my
at the
gosh,
parks, right?
yes.
I
At all
think so.
Disneylands and Disney Worlds, right?
I
Uh,
think so.
There's also a lot of competition these days. I mean, there's Universal Studios, there's Six
Hmm.
Flags. There's a lot of different companies now vying for the same market, right? Just trying to get,
yeah,
parents to take their families to all these theme parks and
Yeah,
attractions. But I think without a doubt, Disney is still at the top. There's
yeah,
no question
yeah,
about it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'd
yeah.
rather go
He,
to Disneyland. Just
yeah.
yeah, it's just. But when it comes to the Universal, is always cheaper. So that's
Mm.
always like the only competing factor that I would go to
Because
Universal.
they have some interesting IP too, Reynold. Like they have Harry Potter, for example, and a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
kids
they got
wanted to
Harry
go to
Potter.
that
Yeah,
one, right? Yeah,
yeah.
right. So,
They got
uh,
Super Mario Land now too.
Yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
oh gosh. Okay, so like usually at this point in the podcast, before we sign off, we usually ask for guests to give us words of wisdom. Reynolds,
Yes.
right? This is the part where we ask William to
Yes.
leave
Yes.
us with
Yes.
some words of wisdom for our viewers.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Please.
We should start with William. If you have anything, like to share, sum up, or whatever is on your mind.
Well, I think that since we talked so much about Walt, I think one of the things that he worked on very much hands on was for the World's Fair, and it was for GE. Everyone at the World's Fair had their pavilions and had their display, and so GE ordered something that would show the progress of electricity across the years. And so Disney, Walt was very hands on in the design of the Carousel of Progress. And it's at Walt Disney World and it's in Tomorrowland. And you start off in the period of time really right as electricity began and you work your way up through. But the song that he had the Sherman Brothers write, that would be the theme song for it, is really a telling theme song for Walt, and I think is a great word of inspiration for anyone. And the song says, "There's a great big beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every day." And in the verse it talks about how we have a dream and that's the start. We follow the dream with mind and heart. And I mean that's what
So
we're all called
inspiring.
to do. And
Yeah, so
so just to
inspiring.
know that whatever's going on today, there's a great big beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every day. And we just have to lean into that. So whatever failure today is only a failure if we don't fail forward. So you lean into it and you learn from it. Whatever's our hardship or our struggle today, we can leave it behind in today if we go into the great big beautiful tomorrow and we look forward to what can happen and could be possible there.
Wow, thank you for
Wow.
sharing that.
Amazing. Yes. Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah. Vic, did you want to add on top of that?
I don't have
It's
anything.
hard to
That's why I
follow.
hijacked this section from you. I don't have anything. How about
It's
you,
hard to
Reynold?
follow
Maybe you
that,
want to
right?
leave us with some words of
Yeah.
wisdom from our insights tonight.
For me, it's more of a call to action for Disney. Like we love Disney. We love what it stands for. We love the excellence. Just help us out with the prices because I'm a dad too. I actually got to go after this. I got to go to the store and buy a Disney gift for my son's friends. We're going to a birthday party tomorrow, and we have to buy something Disney because his friend likes Disney, so we got to go buy something Disney for
Awesome.
for a birthday present. So, yeah. Again,
So
hopefully,
Asian of you,
this
Reynolds. Like,
right.
help us out with a price, Disney. We love your
Help us out with
stuff,
the
but
prices.
you might consider
Maybe
selling it a
some,
little bit cheaper. So
right?
Asian of you.
A little discount. I don't know. I mean, of course, that 50-cent steak dinner is always a good
There
idea,
you
Asian
right?
till
go.
the
It's
end. Asian
nostalgia,
till
right?
the end. I love you, Disney, but you're getting too expensive for me to love
Right.
you.
We all want to go. I want to go more times than every 5 years or something.
Yeah,
Because the
yeah.
last time
Gosh,
I went to
yeah.
Disneyland, like I said, I had 20 minutes from it. Yeah, I think last time I went was probably like 4 or 5 years ago. So
Oh wow.
yeah,
Wow.
You have
so
no
If I
excuse. You're close by.
yeah,
Yeah,
You
if
don't have
close
I
to
if
fly
by.
I
all the way
live
from
if I live
Asia.
that close, if I live that close, I'd be so broke.
Right, exactly. Oh man. But thank you again, William, for joining us. Thank you for all the insight and
Thank
all the
y'all.
education. Hope to have you on again. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
I'd love that.
Yes, we'd love to have you
Yes,
on again sometime.
That'd be
yes.
great.
And then just like to thank everyone for joining us. Please like and subscribe. And of course, sharing is caring. And see you guys on the next episode.
Peace.